Welcome to the Point. On Friday, President Joe Biden was in Portage to visit the Pfizer plant producing the COVID-19 vaccine. His visit was to thank the scientists and workers who produced the first ever vaccine to fight the pandemic and encourage them to do even more.
This administration is going to be guided by science to save lives and to make lives better. That's why I wanted to come here, Albert, to thank you, to thank all the workers here in Kalamazoo. And I'm here to thank my good friend, Governor Whitmer, and she has become a good and close friend. The governor's been on the front lines of this pandemic as well for a long time, and I think she's doing an incredible job in very difficult circumstances. And Michigan is also fortunate to have my buddy Gary Peters as United States Senator and Debbie Stabenow. Gary is here. Gary has been a workhorse in making sure that we move through this funding to get things done, because he understands better than anyone it's about urgency, the urgency of the moment. So Gary, thank you, Senator. Thank you for all you're doing. Last week, I toured the Vaccine Research Center at the National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. I met world-class doctors, scientists, and researchers who were critical for discovering the vaccines in record time. I remember when we first started talking about this, asking Dr. Fauci and others, said, well, it could take up to several years, maybe as many as 6 or 8 years, to find a vaccine. It's a miracle of science and the brilliant minds that we have around us. And now it's a second miracle, the miracle of manufacturing to produce hundreds of millions of doses. Let me say it again, hundreds of millions of doses. I came here because I want the American people to understand the extraordinary work that's being done to undertake the most difficult operational challenges this nation has ever faced. And let me say parenthetically that it's not enough that we find cures for Americans. There needs to be cures that the world is able to take part of, because you can't build a wall or a fence high enough to keep a pandemic out. On our tour, I met a few of your nearly 3,000 workers, Albert. Experts managing ingredients that come in from different cities and states. Experts handling 3D modeling and artificial intelligence to ensure that every dose is properly crafted. Experts ensuring sterile environments so that each vial, each and every one, is safe and free of contaminants. All this is followed by extensive safety and quality control inspection, then careful packaging and labeling. We walk by a freezer farm that then keeps those doses viable so they can be shipped. This is an incredibly complex process. And at every stop, safety is the utmost priority. The whole process takes teamwork, precision, and round-the-clock focus. Machinists operating some of the most advanced equipment in the world, working side by side with chemists, biologists, pioneering technologies that less than a year ago were little more than theories and aspirations. And it takes a partnership, in our view, between the federal government and all the companies and universities contributing to the vaccine effort. Just over 4 weeks ago, America had no real plan to vaccinate most of the country. My predecessor, as my mother would say, God love them, failed to order enough vaccines, failed to mobilize the effort to administer the shots, failed to set up vaccine centers. That changed the moment we took office. I directed Jeff Science, my COVID-19 response coordinator, to lead my administration's work with the vaccine manufacturers to buy more vaccines and to speed up delivery. Albert referenced it earlier, and I want to thank him for making it happen. Because we worked together, we're now on track to have enough vaccine supply for all Americans by the end of July. That doesn't mean it'll be in all Americans' arms, but enough vaccine will be available by that time. These orders allow facilities like this one to plan ahead, accelerate their production schedules. Here's what else we did. When we discovered that vaccine manufacturers weren't being prioritized when it came to scrutinizing and securing supplies they needed, we fixed that problem and got them what they needed. We also used the Defense Production Act to speed up the supply chain for key equipment, like fill pumps and filters, which has already helped increase vaccine production. In fact, on our tour today, they showed me a critical piece of machinery they didn't have before. Now they do, and it's allowing them to ramp up production. And as we increase supply, we're carrying out a clear plan to get shots into the arms of 300 million Americans or more. And I know people want confidence that it's safe. Well, I just toured, and it's where it's being made. It takes more time to do the check for safety than it does actually to make the vaccine. That's how fastidious they are. And listen to Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci assured me that COVID-19 vaccines were safe. That's why several weeks ago I went through the rigorous scientific review. That's why I took my vaccine shot publicly, to demonstrate to the American people that I know and believe it's safe. That's why Vice President Harris also received her shot publicly. We all know there's some history, there's some hesitancy about taking this vaccine. We all know there's a history in this country of having subjected certain communities to terrible medical abuses in the past. But if there's one message to cut through to everyone in this country, it's this: the vaccines are safe. Please, for yourself, your family, your community, this country, take the vaccine when it's your turn and available. That's how to beat this pandemic. And we're making progress. We deployed more vaccinators, the people to put the vaccine in your arm. We're now making it possible for retired doctors and nurses to come back and under law administer these shots. We've put new vaccinators in the field. These include over 800 medical personnel from our commissioned corps at the Department of Health and Human Services, and personnel from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, Defense Department, National Guard. We're literally lining up thousands of vaccinators, because it's one thing to have the vaccine, it's very different to get it in someone's arms. We're also creating more places for people to get vaccinated. We've provided $3 billion to states, territories, and tribes to create hundreds of new vaccination centers to ramp up the existing ones that are there. Right here in Michigan, with Governor Whitmer, FEMA has provided tens of millions of dollars to bolster the state's community vaccination centers. From the National Guard at the Expo Center here in Kalamazoo, to the TCF Center in Detroit, to parking lots and churches across the state.
The president's entire speech can be found right now at woodtv.com. When we come back, the legislature and governor are in the beginning stages of putting together a budget for next year. One Republican appropriator gives us his take on the process next. To the point. Welcome back to the Point. Governor Gretchen Whitmer has laid out her priorities for spending in the fiscal year that will begin October 1st. Not only that, but she's asked for a supplemental spending bill of over $5 billion to fight the current pandemic. Now, it's up to the legislature to deal with both of those requests. Ottawa County Republican Representative Bradley Slaw is a member of the Appropriations Committee, and he gives us his take on where the negotiations are going. Representative, we're back to that stage of the year where everything centers around the budget, but this year it's a little different because it's not just one ask of the budget for fiscal year 2022, but it's also about a supplemental, and we'll get to that in a moment. But as a member of the Appropriations Committee, talk to me about the budget process and kind of where we are right now.
All right. Well, thanks, first of all, for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity just to talk to you and constituents across the state. The budget process, and you probably could do a way better job at this than I could because of your years of experience of being on the ground in Lansing, where, I've only been there 2 years. So this is still a little new for me, but we wait for the governor to come out with a budget, and then and that typically happens around the 1st of February. And then we, from that, jump in and see if we can figure out where we're going to go and how we're going to get there, using those numbers as well as numbers that we believe our constituents are asking us for. So we do have the governor's recommendation. The governor has a budget for 2021-22 of about $65 billion, a little north of that. And then and that's really coming off of a budget year where we had about a $61 billion, a little north of that, amount for the state of Michigan. So it's a $4 billion jump. That's a pretty substantial jump. So we obviously need to figure out what we're going to do about those kinds of things.
There are real questions about revenue and where the money comes from. We know that there is still some federal money that is being kind of backfilled, if you will, into the budget. But revenues for the state do not appear to be on the incline with all of the closures and all of the things that have gone over the past year. What is the revenue situation from your perspective and what you hear from the revenue estimating conferences?
Yeah, so that was a really interesting thing. The revenue estimating conference this last time said, yeah, we're actually, as a state, we're looking pretty good right now. You are exactly right. It's been the federal stimulus stuff that's come in. It's stimulus checks. It's additional unemployment. It is dollars for businesses. So all of those kinds of things have made a big difference in the state of Michigan. But if you look forward, looking at what has been closed, the businesses that have closed, concerns about property tax, potential decreases, there's just a whole bunch of things out there that are headwinds that are going to slow down the ability for us to be able to actually bring in revenue to the state. So from my perspective, we've had a bunch of people in the state of Michigan having to do lots of cuts, lots of not spending money. It's been a feast or famine kind of thing within this whole pandemic year. Either people are doing really well or they're doing awful. And I think we need to really look at the state budget in that kind of a format, saying, yeah, we've got money right now. That's wonderful, but we're not going to have money in the future. How do we set up ourselves so that as we go into the future, we're not punishing ourselves later on?
Well, it really does come down to sustainability. And when you look forward, I don't know, I suspect you don't either, but we know that a certain percentage, for example, of restaurants or entertainment venues or some of those type of businesses just aren't going to be able to come back after almost, not entirely, but almost a year's long closure for some of them. That does have an impact, and all of the people who are employed in those businesses now have to go and hopefully find new employment. But when you look at a budget like $65 billion, with a fair amount of federal money in there, a lot of that is going to end up being one-time spending that you may not be able to come up with in the next budget cycle. Is that problematic for you?
It certainly is, Rick. As we talk to folks across the board, I sat in a higher education meeting as an example yesterday. So universities, community colleges, the state universities were represented yesterday. And, we said, well, we've got some budget concerns. Where do we make these cuts? Some of the enrollment's has actually gone down in the state universities. Maybe this is a place the governor's recommending a 2% increase. We're saying, well, maybe that's a place to decrease. And it was interesting. The state universities, the representative for the state university said, oh, we really believe we should get all of this. And so for me, it's one of those things where we really need to be careful. We've got an expectation that things are always going to be better. And government has that, especially, I think. Seems to be a trait of them that goes on in government, that we're always going to be better next year. And I think we need to be using that extra. If we've got an extra $4 billion in revenue that the governor believes we're going to see, I think we should be doing long-term fixes. Maybe it's bridges, maybe it's whatever, but it's investing that in things that are truly one-time deals and not investing it in continuing education or other kinds of stuff. We need to maintain those, but I don't believe that we ought to be growing that in one-time dollars.
Well, and the problem with one-time dollars is just as you described, that if you put that into a, let's say, higher education budget this year or for the coming fiscal year, and the money isn't there for the next fiscal year, then the net result is it looks at, and as a practical matter, it is a decrease for the next year. And that creates some problems, not just with budgeting, but with optics, right?
Exactly true. Exactly true. It is really hard to say to somebody, oh, yeah, well, we gave you more money. Now we're going to take it back. And it appears like it's a cut. And that's one of the things that I think we in government need to make sure that we're not doing is communicate. Even if we communicate up front that that this is a one-time dollars, it seems like that's never heard very well. So we need to be really careful about that.
So this process will go on in theory, given the agreement that the legislature and the governor came to after the first budget proposal from this administration did not go particularly well with the legislature. There is an agreement to have a budget to the governor by the 1st of July. Here we are as we get towards the end of February. We've got some time. Does this feel like a process that is going to move relatively smoothly, at least from the legislative standpoint?
Yeah, I think, right now I know that there are folks gathering together saying, okay, where do we think we can go and how do we get there? Our leadership from both the Senate and the House are meeting. And I know that the governor's budget team at least has representatives coming in and out of those meetings. So I think there is efforts to make all of this stuff work. And we're going to be working to try and put together, my understanding is, as the chair of the corrections budget, my understanding from leadership is that we're going to try and have a budget inked together, at least maybe it's only pencil, maybe not inked. How's that? At least in pencil out before the end of March.
That would be a pretty rapid turnaround on a budget, and it comes at a time when that's not the only ask, if you will, that's on the table. Because in addition to the budget proposal that the governor rolled out a couple of weeks ago, there is another proposal out there for COVID relief, about $5 billion. Most of that, too, is federal money. And that's something that the legislature will be asked to consider more or less at the same time. The governor would like to see that done yesterday. What is your take, again, as an appropriator, on what will happen with COVID relief?
I'm positive that we are interested in getting those dollars out as well. Really the sticking point, I think, between where we are as a legislature and where the governor is that we believe that we need, much like you and I don't get paid at the beginning of the year, so that with the intention that we'll work all year, right? That's not how it works. We get paid as we do the work. We'd much prefer to do that very same kind of thing with these dollars, these federal dollars. We've got a timeline that we can bring them out. So we should be pushing them forward as there's an opportunity for us to use them, not before. And so we're saying, okay, let's get together. Let's figure out how do we appropriate these dollars right now to this level. Let's say $2.5 billion or whatever that number is. And then we roll out the rest of that $2.5 billion over the next 12 months.
Is there a concern? I know the governor has suggested this, and I don't know what exactly the formula is. Is there a concern that if some of these dollars, pardon me, aren't spent in a particular time frame, that they might be pulled back from the federal government?
The answer, I think that's true. There is that possibility. But based on what I understand, and I'm not on the inside of all of that, Rick, but my understanding is that we can appropriate in this manner and have the time frame to be able to do that, so that it is now and going into the future.
When you think about this process and you think about how these things have developed, obviously nobody expected a pandemic. Nobody expected all of the things that we've been going through for the past 12 months. But given the uneven history of the legislature and this administration and their ability to work together, are you more optimistic about this budget process and about the COVID relief plan than perhaps we saw 2 years ago. Obviously, this past year went pretty smoothly because there was a lot of federal money, and I don't think anybody wanted to get into a big budget battle in the middle of a pandemic. But does this look more like last year's negotiations or more like 2 years ago negotiations?
And I'm not really sure that I've got a good feeling about that. I think there is a desire. There's a true desire from both sides to make a budget happen and to actually get it out there and to move it forward. The I think the sticking point is going to be, how do we spend those one-time dollars? And that is, if truly has a sense of, okay, what does this do for us and how are we going to make it happen? So I'd like to say that I believe it's going to be easy and it's pie in the sky and it's just all going to happen. I'm not so sure that it's quite that easy, but that we'd like to make it happen.
And finally, as you talk to your colleagues, and I know this is complex stuff because we talk about revenue estimating conferences, and those are very good people doing their very best to guess about what's going to happen in the future, and nothing is guaranteed. But as a trajectory goes, how confident are you about the economy for the state of Michigan as we move forward? Because just a year from now, we'll be talking about another budget that has to be done. And it's an ongoing process. How confident are you in the resilience for the economy?
Rick, I was really confident in the resilience of the economy 6 months ago. I was absolutely convinced that if we could get people back into the workforce, get the businesses back open, get restaurants back open, that the trajectory of the economy before the pandemic was really strong. The trajectory today is less strong because we have now had businesses closed for, as you mentioned earlier, really almost a full year. And with that closure and loss, I recently spent some time poring over an email that I'd gotten from one of the folks who has hotels in the area. The hotel industry has taken a hit hugely, and they don't expect business travel to come back. So between business travel and pleasure, they're down, I think, about 80%. So they've had an 80% loss over this last year. Now, that means if they've invested in dollars into the facilities and other kinds of stuff, all of that for them is loss. They've had a loss of the ability to earn money during that time. They're down. That same restaurateur has food services and that kind of stuff inside the hotels. That's down over 60%. So with all of those kinds of losses, now you've got to try and make up something. And they've laid off almost all of their, 2/3 of their employees because there isn't a need for them. How do you get those people back? So we've got some significant headwinds right now in the whole, which is why I think we need to be so careful about how we budget right now.
We'll have a final thought when we come back to the point. Now that there are 2 reliable vaccines to battle COVID-19 and a third that may be coming online soon, there is hope that life may start to return to something like normal in the not so distant future. Even as that is happening, the everyday business of government, like putting a budget deal together, continues, although in a slightly different way. No matter the conditions, we'll be here to cover it every week. To the point.